Men don't lose their empires to armies. They lose them to desire. Jung warned us about the shadow, the unseen part of you that awakens when you meet the wrong kind of woman. Machiavelli warned kings never to trade power for affection. But most men ignore the warnings. They confuse lust for love, comfort for connection, attention for respect, and in chasing what feels good in the moment, they surrender the only thing that made them worth loving in the first place, their purpose. This is not a love story. This is the oldest power trap in history, hidden in romance, wrapped in beauty, and sharpened by your own weaknesses. If you don't see how it works, you will be its next victim. And here's the part no one tells you. This trap doesn't start with her. It starts with you. Most men think power is about money, muscles, or influence. But the kind of power we're talking about today is invisible. It's the kind that can make a man bend his rules, change his path, and even rewrite his identity, without anyone forcing him. Carl Jung would call it the shadow self, that hidden layer inside you, filled with unexamined desires and fears you pretend you don't have. And women, not by malice but by nature, have the unique ability to draw this shadow to the surface. Once it's out, you're no longer leading. You're reacting. You're no longer the man with a mission. You're the man chasing her approval. And Machiavelli knew exactly what this meant for men in power. Once a ruler gives up his center to please another, he stops ruling. So here's the question that will decide whether you stay in control or lose everything. When you fall in love, who's actually in charge? You or your shadow? You might think you know yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your values, but Jung warned, what you see in the mirror is not the whole picture. There's another side, the shadow self. It's the collection of impulses, fears, and unfulfilled desires you've buried so deep that you've convinced yourself they don't exist. But they do. And the most dangerous part? They have more control over your actions than your conscious mind does. And when the wrong kind of woman walks in, your shadow doesn't just show up. It takes the wheel. Think about it. Have you ever been the man who swore he'd never compromise on his principles until he met someone who made him break all the rules? Have you ever poured your time, energy, and money into chasing her, knowing deep down it was pulling you away from your goals? That wasn't love. That was your shadow being triggered, reacting, not choosing. Jung saw this play out in countless men. The qualities we refuse to develop in ourselves, we end up projecting onto others. So when a woman shows you beauty, care, or acceptance, things you secretly crave but don't give yourself, you chase her as if she's the only source of it. And in that chase, you give away your center. But here's the part that stings. The moment she senses you've abandoned yourself for her, she loses respect. And the game shifts entirely. That's why Jung's lesson is brutal but necessary. If you don't integrate your shadow, if you don't own those hidden parts of yourself, you'll spend your life searching for someone else to complete you. And every time you do, you hand them the keys to your kingdom. Jung showed us why men give up their power. Machiavelli shows us what happens when they do. To Machiavelli, every relationship, romantic or political, is a kind of court. And in any court, there's a hierarchy. The moment you step inside, one of two things will happen. You will either hold influence or orbit someone who does. And in the court of love, the man who loses his center becomes a servant, no matter how much she once adored him. Machiavelli studied rulers who lost their kingdoms not to enemies, but to their own need for affection. They overinvested in pleasing someone, neglected their responsibilities, and became predictable, easy to control. Here's the Machiavellian truth. Affection given freely has value. Affection that must be bought with your purpose will cost you everything. That's why Machiavelli advised rulers to keep a strategic distance, not coldness, but space that protects their authority. Because when you collapse your entire life into one person, you stop leading and start following. And leadership, in love or politics, is the source of respect. Lose respect, and you've already lost the game. Think about the men you've seen fall: celebrities, CEOs, leaders. All undone not by enemies, but by a relationship that pulled them off their path. They didn't just lose money or status, they lost the one thing you can't buy back: credibility. Machiavelli's advice was not to avoid love, but to never make love your fortress. A fortress is where you keep your treasures safe. And if the only treasure you protect is the relationship, every other part of your kingdom is left undefended. So how do you protect your fortress without building walls so high you live alone? That's where biology and history collide, and that's what we uncover next. Machiavelli understood the politics of the court, but to truly understand why men keep falling into the same trap, we have to go deeper, into biology. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow. Schopenhauer called it the will. Both were pointing to the same thing, a primal program running beneath your conscious mind. From a biological perspective, attraction isn't just personal taste, it's a survival algorithm. Men are drawn to youth, beauty, softness, not by culture, but because these traits signal fertility. Women are drawn to strength, status, and security, because these traits signal protection and survival for her and her children. And here's the twist. Nature doesn't care if this destroys you, as long as life continues. Look back through history. Kings who waged wars for a woman's hand, draining their treasury until their kingdoms collapsed. Generals who abandoned campaigns to chase romance, only to return and find their rivals had taken their place. Artists and thinkers who lost decades of work after falling into obsessive relationships. The pattern is older than any empire. A man at the height of his power meets someone who awakens his shadow. He mistakes biological compulsion for destiny. He invests everything: time, energy, resources. And in doing so, he dismantles the very foundation that made him desirable in the first place. And the worst part? The cycle repeats. Generation after generation, men fall for the same illusion, as if the warning signs were never written. So the real question isn't, will this happen to you? It's, what will you do when it does? Because biology is not the enemy. Ignorance is. And if you can see the pattern, you can step outside of it. Which brings us to the part most men never hear: the actual way out. Biology writes the program, but you still choose how to run it. Jung believed the only way to stop being controlled by your shadow is to face it, not to fight it, not to deny it, but to integrate it. That's where shadow work begins. Step 1. Identify the triggers. Write down the situations, looks, personalities, or behaviors that make you lose your center. Not the polite answers, the real ones, the ones you're embarrassed to admit, because until you name them, they own you. Step 2. Observe without acting. When those triggers appear, pause. Don't move. Don't speak. Watch what your mind wants to do. And ask, is this me? Or is this the program? That moment of awareness is the crack in the system. Step 3. Integrate. Don't erase your shadow isn't evil. It's power you haven't learned to use. When you accept it, you stop chasing women to fill the gap and start giving yourself what you were looking for in them. Validation, focus, self-respect. But knowing your shadow isn't enough. You need to protect your position. That's where the centering strategy comes in. Centering strategy. How to stay the king in your court. Purpose first. No relationship decision should kill your mission. If it forces you to choose the mission. Multiple pillars. Build your life on more than one pillar. Work, health, friends, skills. So love is an addition, not your whole structure. Strategic space. Stay connected, but not consumed. Distance maintains respect, and respect fuels attraction. Because here's the truth. When a woman sees a man who won't abandon his mission for her, she may test him, but she will respect him. And that respect is the foundation of both love and lasting power. Let's play a game. Imagine this. You've spent the last 5 years building something you're proud of. A business, a mission, a discipline that's shaped you into a man others respect. Then, she appears. Everything about her feels like the answer you didn't know you were looking for. She's beautiful, magnetic, intoxicating, and she makes you feel alive in a way your mission never has. One night, she asks the question that changes everything. If you had to choose between me and all of this, which would you choose? Your shadow whispers, say her, don't lose her. Your instinct screams, this is love. You can rebuild the rest later. But somewhere deep inside, your center says, if I give this up, I'll never get it back. Which voice do you follow? Because this is the moment most men lose themselves, not in a grand betrayal, but in a quiet, willing surrender. And they tell themselves it's noble. They call it sacrifice. But in the language of power, it's abdication. Jung would say you've given the throne to your shadow. Machiavelli would say you've just handed the keys of your fortress to someone else. So, what would you do? Would you risk losing her to keep your mission? Or lose your mission to keep her? Most men never realize. The choice isn't really between her and your mission. It's between who you are with your mission and who you become without it. Because here's the truth. Lose your mission, and you lose the respect that made her want you in the first place. And once that respect is gone, the love you sacrificed everything for begins to fade. Jung would call it the disintegration of the self. Machiavelli would call it the downfall of the ruler. And you? You'll just call it regret. So I'll ask you again, when you fall in love, who's actually in charge? You or your shadow? This is where I want to hear from you. Drop your answer in the comments right now. If you believe in mastering your desire before it masters you, type shadow. If you believe love is worth any sacrifice, type queen. Watch the comments. See which side you're really on. And if you've made it to this point, it means you're ready for the deeper game, the kind of strategies Machiavelli used in politics, and that you can use in relationships. I'm breaking those down in the next video. The 3 laws of emotional power. Watch that next, and don't let your shadow make your choices for you. Because in the court of love, the king who forgets he's a king won't be king for long.